Okay. I think people are going to switch in here.
Amazing.
Okay.
Whoa, we have humans.
Yeah. This platform is so cool. I love it.
It's my first time using it. It's cool.
Yeah, me too.
Sweet. So, welcome everyone. I am normally when I do this, I have my notes in front of me, but given our circumstances and I guess our creative constraints, I'll be using my other screen for that. So, jumping right in, you know that as creatives, we're often trapped into a sandbox and we're used to making changes that happen on the fly. But what happens when we're under creative constraints, right? Ones that are severe, ones that last more than just a few hours, but days and months. Of course, we're talking about the global pandemic, but before we begin, I just want to start off with some introductions. My name is Brandon Hurd, pronouns are he, him. I work at a company called RGA, which is a global innovation consultancy and marketing and experience design agency. And I will pass it off to our wonderful speakers, starting with you, Alice.
Hi, my name is Alice Tsui. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an actor primarily, but I'm also a writer, photographer, director, general artist in the entertainment industry. Who's next?
Let's go radio.
Cool. What's up, everyone? I'm Boy Radio, coming all the way from New York. Pronouns are he, his. I'm a musician, a vocalist, and a visual artist. And yeah, like I said, from Brooklyn, New York.
Ludi.
I'm Ludi Leva. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, multi-hyphenate as well, primarily working as an illustrator and a writer. And I'm currently based between Los Angeles and Berlin, but yeah, currently in the US.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Riffy.
Hi, it's me, Riffy. Living in New York City, he, him, or they, or she if in drag. I'm not super pressed about pronouns, for me personally.
Cool. So, House is a community for queer and trans people of color. It's a community that is about intersectionality. So before we begin talking about the constraints, I want to focus a little bit more on the creative piece. At RGA, we talk a lot about top down and bottom up, meaning that for so long, the media has told us what we see on TV, what we read in the newspaper, and what we listen to on the radio. But now people are swiping, TikToking, snapping, and there's so many new behaviors that are informing what we get to see. So we have the power to say, no, this is not representative of who I am or reflective of my community. And we're starting to see more things like RuPaul's Drag Race, Vida, Gentefied, and we have a stronger voice in changing the storylines, the music, the art, and so on. So I want to read to you all a stat that I came across and then just start talking about it, which is only 11% of LGBTQ youth of color believe their racial or ethnic group is regarded positively in the U.S. So thinking about that, how does your work reflect your identity and why is that important?
I'll start then. That is something I think that for every artist who maybe comes from a different cultural background, you consider that into your work. I think it goes without saying for a lot of us, where we look at our history, we look at our upbringing, what our family has presented us, not necessarily taught us, but presented us, and some of the things that we've grown accustomed to based on, reaction to our work or reaction to education or reaction to the media that we see and the people that we admire and idolize. And to think back to when I was like in high school or when I was younger and I would open like a Teen Vogue or like go on MTV and I would see different artists. I always was it's like it's a common story. You're like, I never saw myself. I never saw anyone who really like made me think like, oh, I can do that too because this person's doing it. A lot of people when I was younger used to say I looked like Tyrese. And so I was like, well, I guess Tyrese is the only like version of an artist that I can aspire to. But I was like, well, there's like a straight hip hop R&B artist, you know, like he's not really coming from the same like connection. Like you said, the queer youth feel like only 11%. So I don't know. As far as my work goes, I definitely start by looking in the mirror. I definitely start by taking versions of myself and thinking outside of that box. I've definitely had people say, well, you look this way, you should probably act, you know, perform or like sing this way. And I've definitely taken those things into consideration, but I also have enjoyed taking myself out of those restrictions and, you know, building and creating things that have no rules and no limits to the imagination.
I love that. And everyone, I recommend streaming Boy Radio on Spotify. I listened to your latest song while I was showering this morning. Good stuff. Love it.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I can
go ahead, Rudy.
Sure. I was just going to add that, like, I love that you mentioned just like how many different mediums and platforms and different avenues that creatives can take today. And that's like, you know, that's been one of the most empowering things for me, because I think traditionally, if, you know, people of color or queer communities or other, you know, traditionally marginalized folks are used in like or are spotlighted in certain platforms, there does often occur, you know, some tokenization or like, you know, there is a loss of control of narrative. And I think that that's been one of the most empowering things about just how things are beginning to unfold, and just more independent platforms and experimental platforms and ways for individuals and artists and collectives to come together and shape our own narratives in a way that isn't always, you know, connected to these dominant organizations or companies. And for me, that's been one of the most exciting things too, with, you know, speaking of COVID-19 and just this moment that we're living in, is you're seeing so much more of this, you know, just start to spring up, and these different spaces and just people moving really quickly and getting really, you know, just really experimental with everything. And it's just been really, really exciting to watch unfold.
Definitely. Kind of riffing off of that. I think I've always identified as somebody with so many different skills and interests, but I've never necessarily been able to call myself a master or an expert in any one thing, because I just don't think my brain is wired that way. Everything that I do stems from one common purpose, and that is storytelling and empathy, because I think that the beautiful thing about art is that it literally breeds compassion, and I think that is incredibly powerful. And speaking of representation, kind of going back to what Radio was saying, I grew up in a family that is, both my parents are Chinese immigrants, and neither of them have ever really supported me in terms of what I wanted to do for my career, and also not my sexuality either. So I've never really had that backing from my family and what I want to do. And growing up, you know, you say that people would say that you look like Tyrese, and people would tell me I look like Jackie Chan. And I'm like, if that's the only option we have out there, there's a problem. I'm like, there's Jackie Chan and there's Lucy Liu when I was a kid. So, and there was no real like queer Asian representation. And I think also something about Asian American culture is that we're taught to be very quiet and submissive, and something that like my parents raised me was like, don't stir the pot, you know, like don't speak out, don't be individual, because it's just Chinese culture and American culture are directly contrasting to each other. So I think in my work, what I do and the community that I represent, it's really important to me to be able to showcase stories of people like me who have maybe grown up with the narrative of, you know, fit into the mold and don't do anything outside of that. But in reality, even if the odds are against you, it is possible to be out there and be doing what you're doing and actually be truly happy with that. Mm-hmm. So
I love that. And I guess thinking about, you know, knowing that your craft, all of your craft is sort of an amalgamation of who you are, what are some of those roadblocks that came in the way?
Well, I guess I should speak. I don't know. I feel like culturally, I'm a part of like a very niche group. Like she was saying, like being queer and Asian and like media wasn't something that you saw, but there was some kind of like Asian representation on television in some capacity. Whereas like being like mixed race, Irish and Egyptian is like a very weird niche thing that's like, there are like no, I don't know any Arab queer people. And if they exist, it's like a very small circle of people. So there was no one for me to like really like look up to, because the only Arabs I knew were people that were like in my, you know, social circles, and not on television at all. There was like none of the shows, none of the programming that I watched ever included Middle Eastern or Arab representation. So I guess for me, it was like the only people to compare myself to were like, you know, white celebrities, or like just everything else besides like me. Like, I feel like sometimes being Arab is super niche, that sometimes when I'm filling out forms, you know, like government forms, there's always like Latino, Hispanic, Black, White, Asian Pacific Islander, African American, Black, but there's never like an Arab, Middle Eastern check. So I'm always like, what do I check? Like, and so I think a lot of what I do now in general encompasses like queer person of color, not specifically Arab, because I feel like I didn't really grow up knowing how to navigate being queer and Arab, because there was no one around me like doing that. But I do mention it, and I do talk about it a lot on the mic. When the mic is given to me, I talk about like being like growing up Muslim and growing up like Middle Eastern, and like the people in my spaces are mostly people who like enjoy drag. And so like when you think of drag, the thing you think of right away is Drag Race. And after 11 years of the show, they finally included their first like Muslim storyline. And then 12 years, they finally included their first Middle Eastern storyline. So we're used to seeing like Latino representation and Asian representation and like Black and Black Southern and like white girls, but you're not really like, it's just kind of being Arab is like a very small like group. But there are things that occur in New York. I'm not sure if they exist where y'all are, but there are like several events that happen here that cater to Middle Eastern people. There's like one party called Nefertiti, and it's like all queer Arab, Middle Eastern, and I went to that, and it was like people from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and Palestine. It was like really refreshing to see. It was a bit triggering, but like really refreshing to see like people coming together and like listening to Arab DJ sets and Arab queens and things like that. So we're slowly getting there.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Speaking on roadblocks, I feel like as a queer Asian American person, as you were saying, Rifi, I feel like that's also a very niche identity to have in the entertainment world, especially as an actor. And because right now we're starting to see more queer Asian representation very slowly. I know Alice Wu just released that movie, The Half of It, on Netflix, which I actually auditioned for. But that's the first movie I've ever seen with a queer Asian lead. And that was, or queer Asian female lead, that was kind of telling an authentic high school story, I guess. But because it's such a niche identity, I feel like the opportunities that are available to me are very, very limited. But at the same time, I guess the small pro that comes out of that is that I don't have much competition. So when there is, you know, a casting director that's looking for a queer Asian actress, there's not a lot of us out there. So there's that. But, you know, it definitely does get difficult because I wonder how long it will be before, you know, my identity is going to become normalized in the mainstream media. So we'll see. We're working to make that happen.
There's something, if I can piggyback on that too, there's something to be said about feeling like we have to compare ourselves to a mainstream sensibility. And I, you know, as much as you want to be able to be a rebel and just be like, F that, like I'm going to do my own thing, like regardless of if I get cast in it or not, it's like, I think it's almost impossible to go into a room and not acknowledge the differences. But I can say this true for Rifi too, because I've known Rifi for a while. Rifi's always been a chameleon, especially in and out of drag. And what's so beautiful about really, I guess, acknowledging as an artist that like we see ourselves in one way, but we also see ourselves in like thousands of ways. To be able to walk into something and have them be like, we're looking for this specific thing. Like, you know, actors always say that like the breakdown is like tall, you know, Hispanic, whatever. But then you walk in as an Asian artist or a Black artist or whatever, and you fit the character more than the original description does, and so they have to then shift their idea of what this character was. I've always come from the perspective of like everything is shiftable, and like especially in creating things, like our imaginations shouldn't be limited by the color of my skin or the culture that I was brought up in. My story is still a queer story, and to be able to tell that story, whether it be writing, music, or movies, or even just in politics, it's like it's becoming more apparent that people are tired of being fed the simple, Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie story. Like, we want to see the stranger people, the people who haven't had their stories told. Even if it is a basic story, like, I still want to see people who look like me or who don't look like me even, but like can tell a story from the perspective of I'm just gonna say like the non-white perspective.
Definitely.
I love that. Thinking about on this notion of roadblocks and shifting gears a little bit more toward the sort of global pandemic. As human beings, we experience something called. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Did I go away?
No, you're good.
As human beings, we experience something called the Eistelung effect. And it's this idea that familiarity leads us to jump to an answer, discarding alternatives. We also experience confirmation bias, which is that we pay most attention to information that reinforces our beliefs. The idea of constraints, however, are critical for creativity. It's why most people and brands and organizations are able to innovate, right? Because they have only so much to play with. I think the pandemic has definitely become a limiting situation. It has kind of become shitty. But in the words of my mentor, shit can be shit, or shit can be used as fertilizer. So given that, I want to open up and do a quick poll and ask you all and our audience this question, which is, do you feel like during the pandemic you have become more creative, less creative, or about the same? And tell us, what new creative muscles you've had to flex.
Are we waiting for a poll answer, or are we talking?
Yeah, you can talk about it. I'll be dropping the poll as well.
I can say for me personally, in the beginning of quarantine, my creativity was gone. Like, there was nothing for the first month. And I think the reason for that is because, normally when we're out and about and we're meeting new people and we're having new experiences, a lot of our inspiration comes from our external world and the things that we encounter. And in quarantine, all of a sudden that's shut out. And I think for a while I was like, I don't feel inspired. I thought that, I think everyone went into quarantine, or a lot of artists came in here thinking, now we have all this time. Like, now we have all this energy and all this time to dedicate to our craft. And then the inspiration just did not come. And I've heard that experience from so many people. However, I will say that as quarantine has gone on and I've become accustomed to this lifestyle of just being confined mostly to my own apartment, it's forced me to, my creative muscle's still there. It never died. It's just, I think the normal things that inspired me were no longer in my everyday life because of the pandemic. But as things went on, I was forced to kind of become more introspective, and then the creativity that came out of everything that's happening right now has been more internal than external. And it's very interesting because I've also been able to find connections between that internal creativity and what I normally experience outside in the world from other people. And it's a big challenge because I think when it's just, me, myself, and I, you're very much not pressured, but you're confined and forced to sort of pull inspiration from your own mind. And it really shows you what you can do, and it really shows you your challenges and your capabilities. And it's been a very interesting experience.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, I had a very similar experience, almost exactly the same, where like the first month I was like, this sucks. Like, I'm not even in my right mind. Nothing is inspiring or creative. I was like in like a, just like a shock response still, where every day I was just like, okay, how can I get through the day without like having, a breakdown, basically? Because personally, I was living in Berlin, and my partner and I had left. And as all the borders were closing because we didn't want to be trapped across the world from our family for, the indefinite future and our friends. So it was like literally leaving like a country with everything in my suitcase. Like I got rid of most things, just whatever fit into a suitcase. And so like literally landing after that, I was just like, it was like a fight or flight response for a while where I was like, this is not where creativity, is able to exist really. But after a while, like you said, it just, I got more internal. Sorry, did I cut out?
Now you're good.
Now we can.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, cool. Yeah. But yeah, just more introspective and more internal, and like finding new avenues of creativity too, because like you mentioned, Alice, like usually it's, you walking around or you're going to events or you're seeing people or you're going to new spaces. And before COVID, I was traveling very often too. So it was also experiencing other cultures and other contexts. And suddenly it was like, okay, I'm in the bedroom or I'm in the living room or I'm in the kitchen. Like that's it. And that's not, usually the most creative space for me, but, I found new ways to tap into myself. And it also involved, it opened a lot of doors too, where suddenly everything was online. So I was able to do events and collaborations with people in Amsterdam or in Berlin or in New York or, and it didn't matter that I wasn't physically there because of that pivot. So that was also really cool just to see how quickly people were pivoting to like different online programming and different ways of bridging communities. And it didn't really matter where you are. And even now, that's something I hope that continues because, traditionally it's, if you're not living in New York or LA or one of these places, you don't always get to experience those events or certain community things that are happening. And now I think there have been a lot of doors open to folks who are in, whether it's more rural areas or in different countries, or it's just gotten a lot more interconnected. And I think that's been really inspiring for my work as well. So yeah, that's how I'm feeling right now. I'd say it's been kind of like a mix of things.
Yeah. So looking at our poll here, it looks like more than half is saying more creative, about a third is the same, and 16% is saying less. So pretty interesting. And I want to focus a little bit more on the business side of things. So I'm going to share some more stats. According to the U.S. Transgender Survey, trans people are more than twice as likely as the U.S. population to be living in poverty. For trans people of color, including Latinx, this number is 43%. American Indian, it's 41%. Multiracial, it's 40%. And Black is 38%. So all of these groups are more than 3 times likely than the U.S. population to be living in poverty. These constraints can obviously have greater implications on LGBTQ and trans people of color. So knowing that for many of you, your creativity is your source of income, how have you had to shift your business model to stay afloat?
Well, so, I work in the industry of and it's like one of the industries that is going to be, I feel like, hit the hardest because, especially if you've ever been to a New York City bar, there's no way to social distance at a bar. People taking their masks off, they're socializing, they've been quarantined for 3 months. So I don't know that I'll have, work for who knows for how long. And, right before quarantine, I was in Australia for a gig, which was like one of those moments in my career that I've always wanted to reach. And I reached it. And I came back Monday, and then Sunday, everything went really bad and people started quarantining. And to notice the shift and wow, I just got flown out to Sydney to perform for a packed club during Mardi Gras, and now I'm performing on Zoom in my kitchen. A week later, it's noticing those things, and a lot of queens kind of instantly jumped on Instagram Live and Zoom and Twitch and all of those things to utilize and showcase drag and get paid through Venmo or through PayPal or Cash App or whatever. But I kind of got bored really quickly because one of the things about drag is that it's really fun to be physical with people. You're socializing, you're on the mic, you're kind of engaging in the room, you're putting a full head to toe look together. And so when you don't have that, you kind of lose a bit of the spark. And so I've had to shift my energy from doing drag to utilizing a new outlet that I've never used before, which was OnlyFans. And I'd wanted to do it before, but I guess I just never had the time to like, because it is a business. Like OnlyFans is like a full-time situation. It's about like creating content on a daily basis and make sure that you're like engaging with subscribers and like utilizing a part of yourself that is very different than drag, because this is like people are seeing me in a very different context now. Mm-hmm. But if I could use it to my advantage, it's like, why not? I'm very sex positive in general, so there was no qualms or anything like that, reservations. It was just a matter of like, okay, I'm gonna have to like be okay with people seeing me in that way.
And do you feel like you have gained a new audience? Do you feel like you're still tapping into your existing audience? Like, how has that impacted your audience? Because I think, like, to your point, like, your customers used to show up at the bars, right? And now they're in new spaces.
Yeah. Well, I was very smart about it for me, because a lot of the drag that I do, and I think Radio will be able to, like, contest to, but, like, a lot of the drag that I do can sometimes be sexual and show a lot of body. Mm-hmm. And so I'm aware that people who come to my shows might look at my drag as entertainment, but there's also a bit of an element of like desire or mm-hmm. something. I just know this from my conversations with people of like complimenting me when I'm in drag and I'm showing body. So I'm like, okay, well maybe I can shift that energy into this platform. And so a lot of those people who might have had interest in that way, or like fangirled or whatever, I found a way to like turn those like thirst traps into subscribers. Mm-hmm. So like shifting them over, it's like, well now here's a platform that you can see me in that way. And I did gain new people as well, because a good thing on OnlyFans is that you can like help promote other users on OnlyFans, other accounts. So you do like a shout out essentially. And so some of those people's subscribers have shifted over to me and subscribed to me. So I'm gaining some people who aren't even probably aware that I do drag, and I have people so it's a bit of both, I think. Yeah.
I love that. It's like opportunity is sort of expanding. And I guess for you, Radio, as an artist, did you do a lot of live performances?
You know what? My response has been somewhat limited, because I think, in the past 3 months, everyone's been through so much. There's been good and bad days. Mm-hmm. We had a loss in our family. We had someone like really prominent in our family die. And just like any person who tries to pull up from a situation where they are like sad, a little bit depressed, it was hard. It was hard to sit down with my microphone, with my keyboard, to like transmute all that energy into something. And like Rifi was saying, there's different platforms and different audiences, and a lot of people did go straight to Instagram Live. And to me, I thought it was a good idea, but I also saw it as a little bit like, I don't know, like the first thing that I thought wasn't to go online and be like, my Venmo is this, or my PayPal is this. I thought to myself, well, I can promote my music, but at the same time, maybe I should take this moment to write new things and to really see what the world is asking. Because I had to sit down and look at the news. I had to look at everything that was happening to, people in different states and different cities, and even in my own city, and think about like, do I write a song about this? Do I go online and turn my Instagram into a news media outlet? Like, do I make sure that people know that, Ahmaud Arbery is like, do I keep perpetuating all of this news? And for a while I did that, mm-hmm. and I'm still doing that. But I think when it came to music, it really hit me in a way where I was like, this is one of those moments, being an unsigned artist and being an independent artist. Really, you feel it, because for every stream that I get on Spotify, iTunes, Tidal, whatever, those streams go directly to me. And if I get on a playlist with a song, and say I go from 150 plays in a day to 3,000 plays in a day, that literally transforms into dollars and cents. But the thing is like, music is so ethereal. Everyone, every day, we probably listen to thousands of songs. You know, Beyonce puts a song out and we're going to listen to it, and millions of our other fans. But she put out a song the same day like 2 million other artists put out songs, independent or mainstream. And it's like our attention span to receiving new media when it comes to like oral media, it's a little bit tricky. So it becomes this game of like my visual work and my sonic work. How do I make those one thing? And I just really leaned into just creating more visual art. And I've had this struggle where I'm like, you know, people look at me, they see a specific look. I work out and I enjoy working out. Health and fitness is important to me. Sex positivity is important to me. It's something that I really worked through to become open and pleasantly and pridefully queer. And I have a lot of friends who are on OnlyFans or who are provocateurs or porn stars, and I fully support them. And it's just been so interesting seeing how people have shifted their focus to virtual media so quickly. And, you know, like live shows, the aren't like too high, but it's still respectively beautiful to watch people still sharing and still making things and using these platforms to do it. So for me personally, I've been challenged and I'm still trying to break it. But, you know, after 2 or 3 months of like really sitting with myself and meditating more and working out on my roof, I'm in a place now, like end of June, beginning of July, where I finally feel confident and comfortable to like engage in these kind of conversations and make stuff and share a picture of me smiling and be like, I felt happy today. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there was news about more shit in the world, and I took a moment to turn my phone off so that I can reset and I can come back and boost the energy so that we can find solutions and, you know, and share joy. So it's been hard. It's been hard.
For sure. I just want to jump ahead a little bit. I know we have a few minutes left. So before I get to the wrap-up questions, I do want to talk a bit about one more thing, which is, you know, you talked about your state of mind during these times. And I feel like mental health is a really important thing to consider right now. And here's some more stats. 77% of LGBTQ teenagers reported feeling depressed over the past week on average. More than 70% are reporting feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness in the past week. 40% of trans people have attempted suicide in their lifetime, which is nearly 9 times the attempted suicide rate in the United States. That number is 42% for non-binary youth. And not everyone is living in the most ideal living situation. And on top of these pressures, we're also living in a moment of racial reckoning. So how do you all maintain a healthy mind, a healthy body and spirit? How do you stay motivated? I know Alice and Ludi, you touched on some of that in the beginning, but I just want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this has been an incredibly challenging moment on so many levels. And for me, I mean, I struggle with depression and anxiety under normal circumstances. So, you know, this has been extra challenging, just trying to like, you know, keep my head above water just in the, like, based on the instability in my personal life. And then also what's going on a macro level, and just, you know, while also understanding that, you know, I'm in a non-Black body and I'm cisgender and I have all these privileges as well. So it's like, you know, taking care of myself and then also acknowledging like where I fit into the bigger context as well. And so it's been, I mean, meditation, like you mentioned, has been literally my saving grace. Like I have to meditate every single day. I have a daily yoga practice, which like, I always liked yoga, but now I'm like, I have to do yoga every day. And if I start to feel my anxiety bubbling up, I'm like, okay, I whip out my yoga mat and I'm like, I have to take 10 minutes or like 15 minutes at least to just like focus on my breath. Cause I mean, that's where I really noticed it. I'm like, I'm not breathing right. Like I'm literally like holding all of this in my nervous system. And so that's been really just really beneficial for me. And taking time away from social media, honestly, it's a double-edged sword, because as an artist who, I rely so heavily on social media for connecting with my audience and like connecting, also just like getting inspired about things. But at the same time, it can be so detrimental to my mental health personally, and I know that. And so it's been kind of finding a balance. Like there'll be like a week where I just won't go on. I take Instagram. I've like taken Twitter and Instagram off my phone for the past week, for instance, and I haven't really looked at it like at all. And then there's other weeks where I'm feeling really inspired and I want to be sharing my work and I want to be doing that. But I think just checking in with myself and actually sitting with like, is this going to serve me right now? Is this going to serve my community? And like finding that balance. But there's no like, it's not mathematical. It's just like, it's like it's a moment to moment thing, I think, for me.
Absolutely. Just kind of picking off of Ludi. I also have picked up yoga in quarantine, and it's been amazing. It's been life-saving. I think, something that, because the times are so uncertain right now, we have no idea what the future holds. And with everything going on with Black Lives Matter and all that, I've been very, very emotionally affected by all of that. And, I think in the moments that I feel really, really weighed down by the uncertainty of the future, I try to ground myself in the present moment. And I think what's important is, when you do have those weeks and those days when you're feeling really inspired, to just jump on that and go and ride that when you can and forgive yourself when that doesn't come. Mm-hmm. And also, breathing, extremely important. I've been trying to take care of my physical health as well, because I think that what we do physically does also reflect how we feel mentally. And very much just like staying in the present. And in the moments that I feel so overwhelmed about my own career, something that has really, really grounded me is just remembering to take my ego out of it, because I'm not in the entertainment industry because I want to be seen or known. I'm in it because I love storytelling and I love the power of empathy that holds. And I think I think that's amazing. Like I'm so honored to be able to pursue a career in that field. But it's not about me. And so the moments when I'm like, what's going to happen? Am I going to book something? What's going on? How am I going to make money off of this? I just stop and breathe, and I remember my why and I remember my purpose, because at the end of the day, that purpose is not going anywhere. And it's, I always come back to that, and things will come to me as time goes on. And I always have to remind myself, just stay proactive, take care of yourself, and things will happen. So, and I also have been throwing myself into these protests and the Black Lives Matter movement, because sometimes when I don't want to think about myself, I want to boost others up, because I think sometimes it's easier to kind of support other people when you are overwhelmed by your own life, if that makes sense. That's how my brain works, at least.
Thank you. Okay, so we have less than 3 minutes. One, make sure you all drop your handles in the comments so people can give you all a follow. That is important. Let's give our wonderful speakers a follow on Spotify, OnlyFans, all of it. And that being said, just the last thing, what advice do you have? If you can give advice in sort of 20 seconds, what advice do you have to maybe those that are allies or those that are in the community?
I will say very quickly, it's just been so important that we all check in with each other as much as possible. I know everyone's kind of in their own worlds, and that is so important to take care of you first. Love yourself before you can love anyone else. So just keep doing that and keep sharing. When you find out or hear about something that seems unjust or unfit for a person's life, share it, because we do see it. And just embrace your community and the people that love you and the people that you have claimed to love. It's just so important right now. People need to feel not so alone in all of this.
Yeah, kind of riffing off of that, I would say identify your priorities and find a balance around that, because I've heard a lot of people, who are very involved in everything that's going on, and it's very emotionally heavy, and it's hard. It's hard to, know what's going on in the world constantly, but at the same time, people sometimes have felt guilty for taking care of themselves, and self-care should not be something to feel guilty about, because you have to be at your prime in order to help anybody. So.
Yeah. And I'd say I've been dealing a lot with finding a balance between like holding myself accountable, but also forgiving myself and being gentle with myself when I do make mistakes or when I do things wrong. I think right now is a moment where there's so much happening, and just knowing that we're all human and we're all learning and we're all imperfect, and just, being gentle with ourselves, but always committing to do better, whatever that means in our context.
Yeah.
Love yourself. Work out at home. Reuse, recycle. Wear your mask. Extraordinary, never been done before. All of that jazz.
Okay, thank you all. This was wonderful. See you at cocktail hour and the next panel event.
Thank you so
guys
much.
Bye.
Thank you for having me.